Wade. Thank you, Ms. Stein. I'm here today to talk about a word that I feel like I cannot escape. It's a word used by parents and pundits to talk about my generation, those people born somewhere between 1980 and 2000. And even though that I think that my generation is far too complex and diverse to be collapsed into one word, everyone thinks that they know what this word means. And that word is millennials. And so I'm excited to be here today to dispel a few myths about millennials as a generation and talk to you about why I think that some of the criticisms against us are exactly the reason why you need us to take on probably the most pressing issue of our generation, and that issue is climate change. So you may often hear that millennials are dubbed the me generation, and it's certainly true that the selfie stick has found its most committed audience under our watch, and in fact, if you hadn't told me to take my phone out of my pocket, I was going to turn around right now and actually take a selfie, but better than I'm not. But I want you to know that this propensity to take snapshots of the day-to-day moments in our lives has less to do with narcissism and more to do with self-expression. So boomers in the past 40 years, you have fomented some serious social upheaval to fight against racism, sexism, imperialism, environmental degradation. And so millennials are a product of that social upheaval. You can't go out and change the world and then expect the next generation to not live that. It is in our DNA. We are the most diverse generation in American history in terms of gender identity, in terms of religious identity and ethnic identity. And with that diversity comes optimism. With that diversity comes the propensity to be creative. And so what? Maybe sometimes we like to put those things on our Instagrams. You may have also heard that our generation is sometimes called the touchscreen generation. This is the sense that we can't communicate with one another because we are too busy looking at our phones. What those critics fail to recognize is that the social intelligence needed to operate in this media landscape is much higher than you might imagine. Take, for example, the idea of Snapchat, which is essentially a text message with your facial expression. And in order to understand that, you have to read someone's face. Take this example here if we're thinking about text messages. The top one, a millennial would instantly recognize as, I'm excited to speak to you today. I'm excited about something in my life. The bottom one means I'm angry with you. And the only difference is a slight punctuation. So I think that millennials are empathetic to other people's needs in a way that no other generation has been. The last thing that people sometimes say about my generation is that we are overeducated. And it's certainly true that millennials are on par to be the most educated generation in American history. This thirst for knowledge is partly one of necessity. This quest for degrees comes because we have to. College degree used to be the ticket to the middle class, but now we are finding that our debt burdens don't match our employment opportunities. About half of millennials will boomerang back into their parents' house at some point in time in their lives because they can't find meaningful or gainful employment. Good thing is, and sorry for some of you in the room, baby boomers are going to retire. And this means that millennials need to be ready. We need to be ready with innovation and ingenuity and creativity to take the jobs that are going to go away, because that's where our economy is going. The problems that we face are grave, and we're going to need really smart people to solve those problems. And if you had to ask me what is the most serious problem that we face, I would say it's global weirding. This is a term coined by Hunter Lovins, the co-founder of the Rocky Mountain Institute, sort of like climate change, right? This idea that the anthropogenic changing of our climate, we as human beings, our use of fossil fuels, our agribusiness, everything in the world that we pollute is contributing to our changing climate. This is the world in which we live. And the science around us is clear. 2014 was the warmest year on record. 9 out of the 10 warmest years in the past decade were record breakers. California, the fruit and vegetable basket of the United States, is experiencing a terrible drought. Water rationing is taking hold there, and it's likely to happen in other parts of the world too. Now, even though we can't say that a hurricane or a tornado is causally tied to climate change, we do know that there is an increase in the conditions that create these weird weather events. You know, when I think about being a millennial in this age of climate change, if we start now, we can create a world in which the most serious effects of climate change don't happen. If we do nothing, our coastlines will disappear. Cities across the eastern seaboard, specifically from New Orleans all the way down to Miami and up to Boston, will go underwater if we do nothing. And I know this is troubling for everyone, but especially for millennials, because we are drawn to cities. We are drawn to their ingenuity. We are drawn to their innovations and also their efficiency. And so millennials will have to find a way to do something about this. And so in some ways, millennials have inherited and no doubt perpetuated this process of climate change that began in the Industrial Revolution. And on more than one occasion, someone from an older generation has told me, a much younger me here, that we are not equipped to fight this issue. We are not equipped to fight the issues of healthcare, or education, or global income inequality. And I'd like to disagree with those people. And I'd like to explain to you why the characteristics that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation are going to be the reasons why we do, in fact, tackle climate change. So in order to find success, if you were a baby boomer, for example, you might have worked the same job for 30 years, saved up enough money to buy a McMansion in the suburbs, and had your 2.1 children. And baby boomers have invested in this system, in maintaining it, if you will. Millennials, on the other hand, are not afraid to disrupt the status quo. We still know that to find success means that we will have to work hard. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But success for us is something very different. It means moving across the country to find your dream job. It means embracing failure as probably the most important thing that I could do early in my career. It means living true to my personal mission rather than the mission of a company. And because we are not afraid to disrupt the status quo, we are going to help reduce our dependency on fossil fuels, which has been the name of the game since the 1800s, in which we found that we could burn things out of the ground to make our economy run. The second reason that I think that millennials are, in fact, ready to tackle climate change is because global weirding is all we know. You don't have to convince us that the planet is changing in a way that we can't take back. No one under the age of 30 has experienced a month in which the global temperature average was below the average for the century. So that means that for me and for many of you in this audience, your planet has only continued to warm. And this trend is going to continue. Because we know this, because we get this at an intuitive level, that means that we're going to be ready to make difficult policy decisions, both now and down the road. Lastly, millennials are global citizens in a way that no other generation has been. Our diversity has connected us to the rest of the world. Not only do we get to see these through the technology that we have through the internet, these other cultures, we get to live them. We get to go and experience those lives as well. Because we know this, we see that what we have done in the developed world has created most of the problems that exist with climate change. We recognize that electrification comes with many benefits, healthcare, education. We want those to happen in the rest of the world. But we are going to have to take a leadership position too and say, we know that we created part of the problem. We're going to have to share our energy technology and our energy efficiency technology liberally with the rest of the world. We must be a beacon, an example for the rest of the world to say, this is how we will fight climate change. I'm a teacher, so I have the great benefit of seeing the nascent, budding character of the upcoming generation, sort of on the edge of millennials and as they move into what is currently called Generation Z. I'm not going to make the same mistake that other generations have made about mine as millennials. In fact, I think that Generation Z is in some cases even hungrier to tackle these pressing issues of the world. The path before us is difficult. No one generation is going to be able to fix climate change, or healthcare, or education, or global income inequality. Together, we will find the solutions. So the next time that someone says something to you about a millennial being narcissistic, or overeducated, or too into technology, remember that self-expression, that creativity, that ability to solve problems, and intuitiveness to technology is in fact what's going to save us. And so I also invite you to share in our optimism for the world. So be optimistic. You don't have a choice. Thank you.